Hey guys, what you're about to watch is a series of clips from a recent live stream that I did where we were playing Genshin and wound up getting into a bit of an impromptu discussion between myself and chat about monetization in gaming, but not just in Genshin, but gaming as a whole, and discussing what is and is not aggressive or predatory, what we find acceptable and not, all that type of stuff. So if you wanted to check it out, I think it's a very, very interesting discussion. I think we had some very good points that were raised all around, and I wanted to say thank you to community member IR Fine for taking the time to edit the whole thing together, because I probably wouldn't have had the time, and he did a great job. So all that I ask is that you remember these are just opinions and discussion, off-the-cuff conversation that we were having, unplanned, unprovoked. So if there's something that said that you disagree with, that's fine. If you want to comment on it, that's fine, but just be polite. Remember, everyone's just having a discussion. No one's here trying to pick any fights and trying to prove anything beyond a shadow of a doubt. So, I hope you enjoy. Let us know what you think. Bye now. Now I feel bad I didn't get Hu Tao. Mihoyo's plan is working. Oh yeah.
Your journey is going well.
Well, that's the evil genius of anything gacha related that has actual story to it, right? It's like you're gonna write all these characters, and you know, if you're Mihoyo and Genshin, you're gonna write them well and have them be very compelling. And if they were just characters in the story, it'd be like, oh yes, I love this character and I love playing as them now that I have unlocked them. But the nature of gacha makes it a very, very different beast that completely changes the relationship without Mihoyo even having to really do that much. There's so many gacha that have characters without much going on, or you have to seek out their stories to actually learn about them. Genshin is clever that they front load it. Yes! Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. I guess that's the point that I'm kind of making. Like, I hesitate to say with any definitive air that Genshin is the first game to really do this. It might be. It's certainly the first one I've encountered. Other than, like, Fire Emblem Heroes, which took more steps to make you care about the characters and actually give them characterization, but nowhere near this level, obviously. They obviously built from the ground up to be a gacha, but designed everything that wasn't to do with the gacha elements to just be a standard story-based RPG in its execution, right? Then they allowed that aspect where you're going to constantly be interacting with these characters, and they're constantly going to be at the forefront of everything, because that's the best part about a good RPG, other than maybe its combat, which is also good, is its characters, and allowed that very nature of its genre to push the characters to the fore so that they can then say, and if you want these characters, you can open up Wallet Kun and get your fingers on them. So they're absolutely benefiting from the nature of the story and the type of game that they've made, having gacha elements in it. Most gacha games lock a character story behind the gacha. Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, as we know, you can play literally the entire game and experience all the story and the voice acting, the cutscenes, and everything without paying a cent. Which is, I think, part of the reason that the game is so successful, because it gets people invested and wants them to actually, or makes them want to actually pull for characters and potentially open up Wallet Kun and really push to get a character that they really want. And it's extremely clever, while also, in a really nice way, giving people a free-to-play experience that they can 100% enjoy without ever spending a cent, which is super cool. Turns out making a good game gets people invested quite a lot. Exactly, exactly. Build the quality game, then if you're going to put in monetization elements, put those in as a part of the game that is well thought out, but not necessarily intrinsic to the way it functions. And surprise, surprise, you'll probably have a lot more people actually pay.
Go collect some source.
Gacha as monetization is kind of sketch, though. Oh, I mean, well, yeah, obviously. But monetization in almost any way beyond just selling new content is already sketch across the board. Like, selling skins, selling loot boxes, selling all sorts of nonsense, battle passes, etc., etc., etc. It's all predatory nonsense. To me, gacha as a concept is not the worst type of monetization if it's implemented properly. Like, I think they do it pretty well in Genshin, despite how, like, if you actually break it down and look at, like, the monetary cost per whatever, is not the friendliest, but every time you pull anything, even just with your free resources, you're building up your power. Like, you are finding new ways to play the game. Every character is functionally completely unique. All the different weapons have their own things that they do, all that type of stuff, as opposed to, like, buying a shit ton of loot boxes in Overwatch so you can try and get the Mercy skin that you want or whatever, and never getting it, and, like, getting a whole bunch of crap that you're never even going to use, you know? Like, at least here you can use stuff and transform the way you play the game in a meaningful way. Say that for a lot of games with monetization or games as a service. Oh, yeah, 100%. You spent $60 to get a Mercy skin in Overwatch? Don't call me out like this. No, did you really, Ben? Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, God. That's unfortunate, my friend. That is rough. You can definitely have monetization without being predatory. Obviously going to be less profitable than exploitative means, but at least it's not morally bankrupt. Oh yeah, of course. That's why there's been such a big push against stuff like that in gaming as a whole. I thought about this a lot as I've been playing Genshin, and I don't know that I would describe the way Genshin goes about stuff as predatory, though. Like, you could make the argument that it is, but I think there's far worse examples out there in the world. And, like, I would describe it as aggressive because of its pricing as opposed to predatory. Like, to me, I mean, maybe it's just because I've been playing the game long enough so I understand how it all works, but it does not come across as predatory. Like, stuff that Overwatch did was predatory. Stuff that Destiny has done in the past has been very, very predatory. But Genshin's pretty upfront about everything. Like, yes, you're literally gambling when you're pulling for characters. 100%. There's no getting around that. But the way things are set up is very clear-cut compared to other examples, in my opinion. I am curious to see what you guys have to say about that, but I do feel like that is, I feel like that's not an inaccurate statement to make, put it that way. Genshin's made less egregious by the existence of worse systems. Yeah. I wonder how much issue people would take with it if those worse systems didn't exist, though. Having played other gacha, Genshin's really not that generous when it comes to gacha pulls. Being at the top of the food chain means it doesn't have to be. Sure, no, absolutely. But I think that a distinction has to be drawn between how aggressive the actual payment scale is, I suppose you could say, and how generous or not generous they are with their free providing of currency, and how predatory the game is. Those are two different topics, in my opinion. Like, Genshin is at the top of the food chain, so it doesn't have to be super predatory to try to survive, but they also don't have to be very generous if they don't want to be. Could say that those are two sides of the same coin, but to me, they're issues that are able to be separated. Setting up to free-to-play polls is a huge time investment, but at the very least, I enjoy playing it when it's not too much of a grind. Right, exactly. And I think there is something to be said for that. The fact that you aren't constantly being attacked to buy things is in and of itself proof that it's not predatory. But the fact that it can take so long, depending on what you're doing and at what point in the life of the game you're at, it can take a very long time to get there, shows the aggression of the pay scale and the lack of generosity. Rule of thumb is that if you can't directly buy the thing you want, it's in the predatory zone. So MTGA is predatory where Runeterra isn't. Hearthstone is predatory where Storybook Brawl isn't. I can see why you would approach it from that way. And it's very much a perspective of, like, anything to do with gambling is predatory. But in the same scale, if the actual mechanisms behind things aren't being obfuscated, then to me that is less predatory because people are able to make an informed decision. Whereas things that I consider more predatory is if you look at, say, Apex Legends and other games that engage in the selling of bundles. Like you can, and Halo Infinite has been bad with this as well, among the various different things that it's been criticized for. How many items are like, oh, this is the cool item, but the price on it is marked up to buy it directly because it's bundled with 8 other things that are all garbage, but because they're individual items, the company feels justified in spiking the price severely. It's like, man, that feels more predatory because you're dangling it in front of someone who's like, yes, you can buy this thing directly, but we're forcing you, if you want to get it, to spend more than you normally would and get a bunch of things that you may not ever even want, rather than just being able to buy the item that you would like. Realistically, if you wanted to go that route, you could talk about how Magic the Gathering as a whole is predatory because up until extremely recently, WotC has never sold singles. You could only ever buy booster packs, which is in and of itself basically gacha. People don't like to acknowledge that, but that's all trading card games are like that until you get into trading and the secondary market and things like that. And without those types of systems in place, yes, that's where you get things like Magic the Gathering Arena, where you can't directly craft anything unless you have wild cards, which in and of itself you only get very sparsely, or if you buy a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of examples of stuff out in the world that we can talk about is predatory or not predatory, aggressive or not aggressive. But I think at this point I would consider Genshin not predatory but aggressive. Whereas you have games that are predatory and aggressive. See what you're saying? Genshin doesn't nudge you too hard into the gambling. Fire Emblem Heroes recently introduced sparking to guarantee special heroes as a subscription bonus, which is gross. Right, fair. But things are obfuscated. How much money does it technically cost to pull a Ganyu, mathematically speaking? If it takes more than a minute to calculate that, it's pretty obfuscated. Fair point. Fair point. I can definitely see where you're coming from in that regard. No, I mean, I concede that point. I concede that point. When I say that it's not obfuscated, though, I'm talking more about how, like, the percentages are there for you to see on what is available and how often and that type of thing. You can see, like, if you go to the shop, exactly how many crystals you're going to get for your money. And while it's not a one-to-one ratio, you can still see that, and then those convert directly into the currency that you then use to pull. So it's not like you have multiple layers of like, well, this is this much, but then it converts down into this much, and that's how many pulls you can do and that type of thing. So I would argue that it is not as obfuscated as I think it needs to be considered predatory. Booster packs are predatory, yep. Depending. Agree with fine that all gachas are inherently predatory. There's different levels of it, though, like you're saying. Honestly, all these things rely on the whales. I think all gacha have to legally tell you the percentage odds now. Oh, yes, they absolutely do. Depending on where you are. When I think of predatory things in gaming, I guess at the end of the day, what I think of is things that it's like, it's free to play, but it's going to constantly push at you and nag at you to spend money to buy things. And Genshin doesn't do that. Like, it gives you the option of buying a battle pass, and it gives you an option of buying the moon bonus. But neither of those things are at all required. And unless it happened at the very beginning of the game, and I've been playing long enough that I don't remember, like, it's not like I come into the game and there's a pop-up like, buy crystals now in order to pull this character. Like, it doesn't do that. It just lets you log in and play. And to me, that's simultaneously far less predatory and far less aggressive than anything else that's out there. And again, we can say, like, it's less predatory by nature of there being other worse systems out there. Sure, you could say that. But the fact that it's not like that, even on its own, in a vacuum, to me means it is far less predatory, and I would argue is not nearly... I would say it's really not at all predatory. Like, the nature of gambling in and of itself is predatory, but unlike pretty much any other free-to-play game out there that has gacha elements or whatever, it doesn't push it on you. And that, to me, lies at the core of making something predatory or not. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what is your personal perception of something that makes a game predatory or not. Like, if you have different metrics, then obviously it's going to be hard to discuss if something is quantifiably predatory or aggressive or whatever. Okay. So, free-to-play monetization in general relies on whales. It becomes predatory when the devs try to generate as much whale milk as possible. Correct. It could be worse as a bit of a fallacy because it could be better also applies. Yes, which is why, as much as this is an interesting discussion about monetization and predatory practices and whatnot in gaming in general, I want to take a step back from that, and that's what I'm saying. If we put Genshin just in a void, just it exists on its own, it's the only game that does this, I still wouldn't consider it to be predatory, specifically because it's not pushing things. It has things there which people can engage with, which are gambling, and gambling in and of itself, you can absolutely make the argument that that is just a predatory practice. But the game as a whole, in no way, shape, or form ever forces you to or constantly pushes you to engage in gambling. And to me, that makes a very distinct difference between being predatory and being aggressive. It's aggressive in its monetization if you do choose to engage with the gambling and choose to put actual money into it because you don't get very much return for your investment. But the fact that they're not constantly egging you on to go and engage with the gambling systems makes it, I would consider it to be not a predatory system in that regard. One could argue the battle pass is pushed harder than anything because they're constantly giving you level up rewards from it. True. So you constantly have your eyes on it. It's something that is constantly coming up. But that 100% without a doubt is not predatory. That is aggressive. Because it's 100% clear what you're getting. You buy the battle pass, here's everything that's available in it. The fact that it has some FOMO aspects to it, you might be able to consider predatory in that regard, but everything is laid out 100% for you, and it is exceedingly easy to complete the battle pass if you're playing the game even slightly regularly. And if you're not playing the game slightly regularly, then there's no reason for you to be spending your money. So the fact that the battle pass is the thing that's pushed most aggressively, I think lends itself to my point. Is Minecraft predatory? Not that I can think of. Granted, I haven't played Minecraft regularly in years, but I mean, you buy the game and you play the game, right? Like, I don't think there's... I mean, I guess you can, like, buy skins and servers and stuff, but that seems very cut and dry. That doesn't seem predatory to me at all. You can even go as far as to argue that just having 5-star characters show up with as much screen time is pushing you to roll for them, but that's a bit much. Yeah, I would say that that is a bit much, because we do see non-5-star characters all the time. You know, we've had entire events centered around Zhongling, who's a free... not just a 4-star, but a free 4-star. We've had all sorts of events with Barbara, and yeah, Jean is there too, but like that's because they're sisters, so from a story sense, it makes complete sense. They made a 4-star character, the ruler of Liyue, and she's around all the time. So, yeah, I definitely can see why people would make that argument, and it's a good point for you to bring up, and I totally see why you're bringing it up, but I agree, it's a bit much. Don't like that the default first option in the start menu is shop. That always irked me. Is it? I never actually looked at that. The game intentionally feeds a lot off FOMO. Yes. The fact that there's limited time events, limited time banners, the limited time battle passes, 100%. And that's absolutely something that I can criticize it for. And if you want to consider FOMO as predatory, then that is definitely something that would lend itself to the argument that the game is predatory in that regard. That's another paradigm that we would have to look at, and is unfortunately something that so many games are engaging with right now. So I can 100% agree with that. The game is fueled a lot by FOMO, and if you consider FOMO predatory, which I think you can make an argument that it is, then that adds a predatory element to it, which is definitely very fair. Amber has a whole manga about her, and she is free. This is very true. Very true. Girls being hot pressures me to spend money because monkey brain like woman and want to be hot girl. Fair. Yeah. Well, and that's definitely a thing, too. I mean, that's just the nature of waifus in general. And I mean, why anime has so much focus on attractive female characters and attractive male characters for those who are seeking out the husbandos of the world. And I mean, that's just an evolution of the idea that sex sells, which is something that just has been an intrinsic trait in any and all different permutations across the entirety of human history, and is never going to change. If you choose to engage with something that, as a creator, is like a literally making something that you're trying to sell to people, with one of the most basic things in the human psyche, I can't really criticize you for that. So, but no, it definitely does. Sex sells, not to me. Aces everywhere. Fair enough. Fair enough. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a very fair point to make. But it does definitely get most people. Also, sorry this whole thing spawned off Man Hu Tao is cute and I want her. No, don't apologize. I love having discussions like this. I love the gaming industry. I love games. I want to make games. I want to write games. Like, I love gaming. Obviously, as someone who is a gaming content creator, gaming is a huge part of my life. So these are very important and interesting discussions to have, especially in a space where everyone is just discussing and not judging or arguing with each other, but discussing different points, which is good. And unfortunately, not the type of space that exists super often nowadays. So, no, I'm enjoying this a lot.